Hey guys, I'm super excited about this interview with Israel Cooper from home. But before we get into it, my marketing manager, Zaya, has forced me to record this video asking for your help. We know a number of you are listening to the podcast or watching the podcast, but you're not yet subscribed. So to help other owners like yourself find the wisdom that's in these interviews and also to help us make better content moving forward, please hit that subscribe button. And better yet, leave us a comment. Tell us what you love about the podcast. Tell us about what you hate and tell us who you've enjoyed listening to, who you'd like to see moving forward. That's it from me. Enjoy this episode with Israel Cooper from home. Welcome to the Business Mastery Podcast, Israel Cooper, who's come in on his birthday.
I have. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. Fun intro story, which I haven't told you yet. I remember seeing many years ago, driving down Fitzgerald Ave, and you guys used to have a billboard on Fitzgerald Ave with
the homes counter.
The homes counter.
Yeah, that's right.
And I always remember thinking that is such a good billboard. Most people don't do billboards particularly well, but that was so great because it had that little digital counter
That's right.
that ticked over, and I looked every time and I was like, there's one more.
Yeah, that was actually triggered by a press article one day, front page, lamenting the fact that nothing was getting done in the Christchurch rebuild. And I was so disappointed when I read that, knowing how hard our team was working, how many homes were getting repaired and rebuilt every single day. I thought, no, hold on. I need to show a visual way, if not a small way, at least of just the work our team was doing, that homes are getting fixed and repaired and rebuilt every single day. Yeah, that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, nice. And that's such a good feedback loop, as you say, for the team and an encouragement for them to go, hey, we're actually making progress. Because I can't remember what the number is, but I remember in the red zone, there was 12,000 homes just in the red zone. So it must have been, how many homes did you guys fix as?
So our total number was just under 4,000.
4,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a mind-boggling number.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
When you line up 4,000 homes in a row, that is a lot of houses.
It's a big, I mean, you're talking about a pretty much, a lot of Ashburton on its own.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. And so building off of that, Build Tech as it was then and home as you are now, what was the entry point into the market at that point for you guys as Build Tech?
Yeah, I mean, so we started primarily as just a response to help and do something practical. My dad, who was involved in the early days, when everyone was rushing out of the city, those moments after February earthquake, he rushed in to see what he could do to pull people out of buses and all of that. So, he was a man of action. And I was the one to help sort of channel that action into a structured business form. So that was the genesis of Build Tech, really just a business set up to help with the rebuild. And so since that time, as the rebuild started sort of winding up, we started turning our attention to where else could we help. And right at that same time, so this was around 2015, the first sort of stories, if you remember John Campbell and Campbell Live, the first stories started coming out around people sleeping in their cars. And so, the sort of the housing register or homeless was not really well known.
Yeah.
And that started to happen more and more. And so we started to see, actually, it's not just a problem of people displaced from their housing in Christchurch. It's a national problem.
Yeah, I've noticed you talking on LinkedIn using that phrase houseless rather than homeless. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think when we think about homeless people or people who are experiencing forms of homelessness, the assumption is often these are people living on the streets, under the bridge in Kaiba Pass Road in Auckland or somewhere in the city centre here in Christchurch. But homelessness, so those people do experience forms of homelessness, but they're probably more houseless, because homelessness actually is really fundamentally a failure to belong.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually, if you talk, as I've done to those people under the bridge in Kaipa Road in Auckland, they have a very strong sense of community. And yes, they are without a house, but they feel like they belong. They have a strong sense of camaraderie and friendship and sense of belonging. And so they probably wouldn't see themselves as being homeless. Yet you have people who are living in wonderful, beautiful mansions in places like Fendos and Mirabel who are very lonely, very isolated, and they are probably feeling or experiencing forms of a sense of homeless, not houseless. So it's about that idea of belonging. And so that's what the house is an important part, right? It's an important part of contributing to a sense of belonging, contributing a sense of community, creating a safe space to build relationships. But it's just one part of being part of a community.
And so is that part of why you called it home?
Yeah, that's really the fundamental reason. While we were a construction company and we built houses, the mission was much bigger than that. The mission was about the people in those houses and their welfare, their well-being. And we'd experienced that going through the Christchurch earthquakes. People were displaced from their homes, and the effect that had on people was really profound. On children, staying in school, on parents trying to hold down jobs. Suddenly when you're away from that security, safety of a house, every part of life gets really, really difficult. And I think we take it for granted often that the safety, security, permanency of a house or a home affords us. So it was that sense that we learned through the earthquakes that actually houses and our homes in particular give us a greater sense of security and belonging for the rest of our lives to then flourish and do really well.
Nice. Yeah, it just as you were talking, it made me think about that whole experience. We grew up in Dallington and our family home was in the red zone. And I remember my mum saying afterwards that she'd been interviewed by a student from University of Canterbury about the lack of community, the loss of community, and moving from somewhere where school was a 5-minute walk away and the football club you played at was 10 minutes away. And our entire lives was in probably a 5K radius.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that was gone. And so that, in a sense, they did get a new house. They got a new house in Pegasus, which was awesome, but their home was no longer.
Absolutely.
And so it's quite a powerful thought that. And so how does that, actually thinking around business and how that was a massive opportunity in the construction sector post-earthquake and helping rebuild the city, obviously. But there's not a lot of businesses that I would say grew into something out of that. There was a lot that probably grew themselves out of business and or scaled up and then had to scale back down. But how did you guys, I'm curious about that. Like what was it that you think allowed you to grow and sustain and continue that growth?
Yeah, it's a great question. And certainly, we almost didn't multiple times.
Sure.
I think, we certainly at times grew too quickly and didn't pay attention to building the sort of the necessary capability and capacity of the organization as we were growing. But I think what was helpful for us was a strong sense of purpose or mission. And what that meant was that the business, the organization just became the vehicle for that mission or that purpose. And so in the case of Christchurch earthquakes, when the sort of the rebuild started to wind up, at least in the residential space, the sense of purpose and mission was still there. And so then we could ask ourselves, okay, this is the mission, this is the purpose. Who else is in need? Where else can we serve? And so we were able to then sort of adjust and pivot, change our model. So we shifted from repairing primarily to then, building new homes. We shifted geographically to need in Auckland, Wellington, and regional towns. And so we were able to sort of change up our business model and adjust and adapt, because we were really still asking the question is, here's our purpose, here's our mission. So what's the need and how do we now serve it? Because it's now changed a little bit, but we're still trying to serve that need. And so we changed what we offered, we changed what we built, we changed where we built.
Mm-hmm. And so to pick up on the purpose thing, was that the business molding to fit the purpose, or was it the purpose being reinterpreted, or how did that?
Yeah,
how's that framed? A bit of both.
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I think we had a clearer understanding, I think, of a purpose as we went. And so it was definitely a bit of both. I mean, fundamentally though, the need was people did not have homes. Again, in that broader sense of the home, the sense of belonging, the sense of place, the sense of community, all those thick relational networks that come with it. In Christchurch, that was as a consequence of a natural disaster event. But actually what was taking place around the rest of the country was in somewhat a consequence of decades of economic policy, that were actually forcing displacement. So it was a bit more of a man-made displacement. But people were still suffering the same thing, which was a lack of home, a lack of a place to belong. And so, places like Auckland, these were driven by increasing rents, a shortage of housing, rents outpacing incomes, more and more people not being able to find a place they could afford, going on housing registers, waiting for housing, living in cars while they were waiting, living in overcrowded garages, all of those things. So they were still experiencing the same thing, just the cause of it was different.
Yeah. And the purpose, as you said, is something that you've got increasingly clear on. It's something that 99% of business owners that I would speak to are not clear on. Their purpose, why they exist, what their vision is, and their mission, as you so nicely put there, who is in need and how can we serve them? How did that unfold for you guys as a business? When did that become something that you decide? Because I think the challenge that I always have in coaching through this stuff is there's nothing urgent about it.
Yeah.
It's highly important, but it falls in the non-urgent, non-important section of the Eisenhower matrix, if you will. Yeah. And so I'm just curious about how and when you decided, okay, this is something that we're going to nail. We're going to spend the time to put words around it. We're going to spend the time to orientate our company around this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, day one, there was almost a way in a motivating urgent need, right? Respond to the earthquakes. So that was helpful in the first kind of let's get going. But you're right. I think it was probably about year 3 or 4 when we really we had grown too quickly. We were in real challenging financial situation, and there came a real, crisis point for me and my wife. My dad had finished up then, and so we were kind of left holding the reins. And there was a moment for me and my wife to go, okay, hold on a minute. Why are we doing this? Because this is not succeeding financially. This is not at that stage a profitable venture. Why are we doing this? And so that forced that crisis situation forced some really deep questions in us personally, collectively, and also with our team at that time. And so I think that's when we really started to ask those questions. And I think I realized that I was confusing means and ends. And by that, I mean, I was focusing on the profitability of the business, making money, and the business mechanics. Now, they are all essential things. But I use the analogy of kind of like blood in the body, right? If you and I don't have enough blood, we are going to die. But you and I don't exist for blood. Like it's if we just, focus our entire life just to ensure we've got enough blood, we'd have a pretty meaningless small life. And so I think I realized that business is the same, like profitability, cash flow, the mechanics of the how and all of that, they are essential, but they are not the ends. That's not what you're aiming for. They are just the means to get you there. They are the lifeblood of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helped me clarify to go, okay, those are important means. I need to pay attention to them because right now we're not doing well. But what is the ends that we're working to? And it came back to then reflecting on those early days of when, the motivating force to get this going, to get BuildTech started. It was the people who are out of their homes and we wanted to help. And so that really allowed us to crystallize that. And that began the journey of also the name change to go, actually, we need our name to reflect the ends, not the means. Because BuildTech was me focusing on the means. I was trying to go, I came from a tech background. I thought, construction industry, inefficient, unproductive, it needs more technology. It's going to solve all its problems. So again, good thought, but that's means, that's not ends. And so I think the name was an important shift to just identify this organization exists ultimately for home, to create homes for people, a sense of belonging. And so, so that's where we landed on that.
That's such a juicy, I feel like we could spend an hour and a half just talking about that. It reminded me of, there's a book by Eli Goldratt, and the name escapes me right now, but he's this management thinker, Peter Drucker-esque, but a little more logistics focused. And he poses that question in the story, and he says, like, what's the purpose of business? And all these people give answers, and it boils down to profit. Like, profit's the answer. And I think and his point was, like, if you don't deliver profit to the shareholders, you don't have a business.
Sure.
Which, on the one hand, I and that's something that we work on really hard with our clients, is it needs to be profitable. It needs to be serving you as an owner. And as you so well rightly put out, and I think this is where most business owners that I meet with, the vast majority are actually quite people focused. They actually have a heart for people and service. They're not always aware of it or connected to it, but dig a little bit deeper and you'll find they actually really care about people, and they're trying to make the world better in some way, in some particular form. And so it's just really interesting that I love the analogy of the blood and the body, but it's, again, I think sometimes these thinking about it and doing something are completely different. Like Covey says, to know and not to do is not to know at all. And so it's cool. And it's also mad respect to you guys for actually taking the time to, ask those deeper questions, and then not only just ask them, but then do something with them. So, I think it's something from the outside looking in, when I see your brand, and the content that you create, etc., and the comments you make publicly, that I think it shines through. And so it's really cool. And obviously that has an impact on the team. I just want to touch on that. How is that being clear on that purpose impacted the team, would you say?
I think it's been incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One is the area we work in is really hard. I mean, construction's just a hard industry. I have grown to respect tradespeople immensely. I am profoundly just in awe of full tradespeople, wherever they sit across the entire supply chain. So construction is really, really hard. And then when you add on top of that the layer of construction that is aiming to serve people well, so build affordably, pay attention to environmental impact, go into regions where supply chains and construction are not solid or thick. This is adding another layer of challenge and difficulty on top of something that's already hard. So You know, people, you're talking, you know, you said about motivations, you know, most employees, I would say all employees, and whether they're acknowledged or not, they come to work to earn a paycheck to provide for their family.
Mm-hmm.
That is a family good reason to come to work.
That is a good reason.
You know, that's essential. And I would say it's probably your motivating reason to come to work.
Yeah.
But if that's all there is, those really, really hard days, there's going to be somewhere else that offers the same or more paycheck without all that extra challenge. And again, it's completely understandable why employees jump to those other opportunities. So when you have something on top of the paycheck that is a purposeful, above just your own purpose, but a part of a bigger purpose, to serve others, to meet a need in others, that is profoundly motivating. And particularly for those difficult days, those challenging seasons, that tough job, those, you know, dig deep moments. And so I think for us, that has been essential. We would not succeed as an organization, given how challenging and difficult our projects are, if we did not have that strong purpose motivating our employees. Because I would forgive them all for just walking out and going, you know what, I can get, you know, the same amount or more somewhere else without all this extra stress. So it's been important, it's been necessary, and it's been essential, I think, to keeping our team motivated, encouraged as they do their work.
How have you measured that, or have you measured that in terms of retention and productivity? It's not necessarily a great measure of it, but I'll ask that anyway. In what ways can you point to quantitatively that would say?
Yeah. I think just very high level, the number or proportion of our total staff who have been with us for more than 10 years. So, you know, we're only an organisation that's been going for 14. And when I look around in our construction organisation, a large portion, probably close to half, have been with us for nearly 10 or more years.
Wow.
Our turnover relative to the construction industry, which, you know, runs quite high at, you know, nearly 30%. Historically, the average has been closer to 17 for us.
Wow.
And then also just our, and this is an interesting one for me, is the proportion of women who work for us. Now, the construction industry is around about 15% of the workforce is females, and particularly site. Obviously, it goes up when you're in back office things. We, in terms of our total construction organisation, we're up around 42%
Wow.
female, and on site that's closer sort of to 20-25%. So, and I give that one because what I've found is females tend to be particularly attuned to healthy workplaces. Also, they're males.
Yeah,
They will more likely go, no, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to move on. Whereas, you know, guys tend to just kind of slog it out and stick it out, sometimes to their own detriment, I might add, and particularly in the construction industry.
Yes. Yeah, that's amazing and really cool that you can actually point to those figures. And again, nice to see, because I think it's easy to hear this stuff and go, oh yeah, that makes sense, that if we were to connect our team with some higher purpose, then that those intrinsic motivators are going to drive them far more than the extrinsic motivators like the paycheck. But to actually be doing it and to be measuring it and driving it. Talk to me about culture in your business and how what are some of the things that you've done to enhance that? Like you said, you've got great retention and a really healthy workplace. What kinds of things have you done to create that?
Again, this has been a really big focus of ours. Again, what we I think realized helpfully early on is that, and we've got this sort of saying, in order to build flourishing communities, we have to try and live as one ourselves. And so what that meant is that we tried to pay as much attention to the how as we did to the what. And so we had a strong motivating why, but those needed to carry on through this, sense of integrity. I'll use that word, in terms of we were living out the values that we were trying to achieve and accomplish in the homes we were building. So getting that right, recognizing the importance of that was really a helpful first step, because what it meant is we were able to prioritize, invest, create the space and time to invest in the how, the culture, the people, the organization systems and structures, as much as kind of achieving the mission, building the homes, all of those sorts of things. And so some of the stuff that we've really focused on was having a really clear, well-articulated, understandable set of values. Now, this is as you'll know, this is a tricky area, because a lot of value statements tend to be kind of nice marketing spin, and you put it up on the wall, and things like excellence, teamwork, and that's kind of where they go, and that's where they stay, and they don't sort of disseminate through the actual any of the organization. For us, what we've tried to do is firstly, define our values, unpack them in really simple layman's terms, and then actually make every part of what we measure, how we reward, how we recognize, tied to those values.
Mm-hmm.
So performance, doing your job really well, is what you get paid for.
Mm-hmm.
But special recognition, special reward comes when you do your job with those values tied to them. And so we built in, recognition and motivation and performance measurement tied deeply to those values in all our employees. And it also meant we had to adjust and change our systems and processes because they simply didn't align with our values. I remember one of our values is integrity, and we recognize that our contracting process with many of our suppliers and build partners was not integral. There was not a fair sharing of, risk and reward. There was often too much risk being pushed on our subcontractors or our build partners and suppliers, and the rewards were not being equally shared. And so that was a big challenge to us to go, how do we work towards a contracting regime that is open, that is transparent, that balances risk and reward fairly and equally?
Mm-hmm.
And we are not there yet, but
Right.
we are on the journey to improving those processes. So that's just one example of where the values have to actually inform what you do and how you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be willing to change up ways you do things to ensure that they actually happen.
Yeah, talk to me about what your values, how you've, because integrity is one of those words that is often touted as a value by a business owner, and I think we can all recognize that most people would rather prefer to deal with somebody who values integrity than not.
Yes.
So how have you brought that to life? I'm interested specifically in the words that you use, the phrasing that you frame. We have a client who describes integrity to his team as doing the right thing even when it hurts. And so if they're in reglazing, and if they break a window or they don't install something correctly and it's not perfect and they have to go back and do it again, that's the marker of integrity. It's not when it's done perfect.
No,
exactly. It's when it actually hurts you. But I'm curious about how, as an example, how you frame those values up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think by its very nature and the word itself, values, it's something you value.
Yeah.
And in life and in business, right, there are always trade-offs. You're working with a finite time, resources, so things are always, you're trading off different things. But values, what they do is they inform what you value the most. And so therefore, values, as the example you've used, they should often cost you because you are valuing them more than something else. And so we have tried to be really clear about our values. This is something great to aspire to, but we recognize there's a cost here. So for example, we use the example of integrity. Integrity does cost you. It costs you time by going and doing things the right way, or going and redoing it, or putting your hand up, or it costs you. Service is another one of our values. genuine service should cost you. Like it means you go out of your way, you take extra time, you help a colleague when maybe it's not your job, you go over and above for the customer. It will cost you something. So I think by being really clear and explicit, and also okay with the fact that these values will cost you, and that's okay. We're going to make space for that in our budgets, in your time, in how we understand and recognize your job role and set that up. These things will cost you, and there will be a cost involved at an individual level, at a team level, and at a company level.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice distinction as well, because it also values cost you as an owner in the sense that they cost you the time to craft them and refine them and then introduce those systems to the team. And I think oftentimes I had a really bad experience with my car being repaired recently, and the panel beater that repaired it had all of their values in silver plaques on the wall, and it was quite shocking, because obviously this is what we deal with every day, and quite shocking to see, like, this is just the paradox of having the value on the wall and on a silver plaque, and then not actually remotely delivering it. And it was confronting for me, because I think that's often times what we do with them is we come up with the values, and we got values, but if you're not actually integrating them, like you said, into performance reviews, into team meetings, into budgets, then what's the point in them?
And also asking yourselves and your customers and your suppliers and your team, how are we performing on these? So we do at least 4 times a year with our staff, and we do it at least twice a year with all of our build partners, suppliers, and customers. How are we doing on each of these values? Tell us where we are not doing well. Tell us where we are doing well. And hold us to account on these values. And those feedback things are really important, because, I mean, we all have blind spots, like the challenge and difficulty of business. You've got to make sure you've got someone constantly, feeding back to you, telling you. And, internally, our team will have a perspective. Externally, our customers, suppliers, and build partners will have a perspective. And you've got to be really open to that. And if you are going to also ask, you have to be willing to change. Because I think if you're asking the question, how are we doing these values? And, maybe they tell you, well, on this one, you're not doing very well at all, and they don't see any change, the next time around, they're not really going to bother to actually tell you. So again, coming back to that integrity, that's about the integrity of the process, right? If you're going to create feedback loops, make sure they're genuine feedback loops, and you're genuinely taken on board, and you're genuinely willing to actually change. Otherwise, don't bother doing it.
100%. Yeah, I recently had I feel like I'm just constantly complaining about bad experiences here, but my mother told me, if you didn't have something nice to say, don't say it at all. Generally, I don't give, if someone's done an average job, I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But if it's really bad, and which I recently had bought something from Starbucks at Riccarton, and it was such a shockingly bad customer experience. The person did not acknowledge me whatsoever. There was no smile, no humanity at all. And I was like, this is really, like, if I was that owner, I would be shocked at my staff. But the whole team was like that. It wasn't just one person. It was the culture. It was the way things were done. And so I wrote a message to Starbucks, and then I got a note back from them saying, hey, thanks for the feedback. Can you please fill out this form? And then I filled out the form, and then after the form, I got a follow-up message to say, were you satisfied with the process? And I was like, no, because you don't actually want the feedback. If you're going to ask for feedback, then you should be on the phone to your customers and the disappointed customers more so than the impressed ones, and going, what can we do to improve? Otherwise, don't bother asking.
Great.
So
100%.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I want to pick up on what you said about the background that you came in terms of with that technology side of things and looking at the industry as this industry is just ripe for change. How has that shifted now that you've been in the industry for a while? Is that something that shifted, or is that something you guys are still pushing hard on?
No, it's certainly a real focus for us. I think there was probably a lot of naivety in terms of outside looking and coming in to go, oh, technology is going to solve the problems.
Yeah.
So I've become a lot wiser in that regards. There's a couple of challenges I think specific to the New Zealand construction industry that technology to some extent could solve, but isn't really going to move the dial as much as it can in other places. The first one is we are a tiny island nation, the bottom end of the world. We're a long way away from everywhere else. That's somewhat solvable, improved and efficient supply chains and global transportation systems. Yeah, maybe. But the real big challenge one is we're a tiny market. We are so small. I mean, we are the size of a mid-tier US city, entire country. And we're spread over a geography that is like nearly 3 times the size of California. So he's a profoundly difficult roadblocks in the way, and technology needs scale, and we just don't have the scale as a market. So those are real big challenges. Now they aren't entirely insurmountable, and we have definitely over the years focused on efficiency around panelization and prefabrication. Probably where we've found the greatest efficiency is in the design phase. And this is where technology is really helpful. I mean, nowadays with BIM and efficient CAD stuff, and now AI, providing input into, some of the design and documentation processes to make that more efficient and to avoid, errors and all of that. These are things you can make good changes in. And we've, through our design efficiency process, we've been able to make good changes with not only the design of the homes and their efficiency to build, but also working out good methodologies to build them. So I think there are things more we can do as an industry, but we do have these real big barriers that make it hard.
And as far as the industry goes, what do you believe is the solution to, or obviously there's not one single solution, there's no silver bullet, but what are some of the big solutions? I remember Knauf, the German plasterboard company, coming and then leaving, and I know the plasterboard in particular was challenging at one in some recent times. But what, in terms of the supply, and it's pretty common knowledge that building houses in New Zealand is expensive.
Yep.
What are some of the solutions to that?
Yeah, I mean, there are quite a few. I think, we need to design our houses more efficiently. And I think, the building code in New Zealand is a challenge. Our building consenting authorities, the BCAs, I don't know what the number is, but it's probably circa 30 around the country. Again, for a country that's the population size of nearly Sydney, which is 1, it just makes it a lot more challenging and inefficient to just consent and design and all of that. So I think there's some efficiencies we can get as a country in that. Organizations like, Shane Brearley at Simplicity Living, who have, built really efficient methodologies in how they build, apartment blocks, through just consistent process improvement. Again, a lot of that's through design efficiency, methodology, good material selection. You can actually meaningfully move the dial in terms of construction. And certainly for us, that's what we've done. And we're seeing improvements. For example, building to Homestar used to be a lot more expensive, Homestar 6 and then Homestar 7, through just design efficiencies, working with build partners, supply chains, selecting materials, more efficient methodology on site. We're able to build to Homestar 6 at cost neutral, and now getting close to building at Homestar 7 cost neutral. So we're building higher quality homes, more energy efficient, for at least cost neutral. And then the next step in that journey will be starting to take more and more cost out of those processes. But what we're seeing is we're starting to build up scale. We're starting, to get standardized designs. Some of those efficiencies are starting to come through. And over time, we'll just keep coming through more and more.
Talk to me about that in terms of the standard building those houses, apartments, or whatever they are consistently. Talk to me about how that's unfolding for you guys.
Yeah, again, it's a journey. It's an ongoing journey. I think now that we are sort of in a lot of cases the end customer through the Home Foundation, the developer through Kāinga Maha, and now the builder, we've got control over that whole value chain. So it means that we can start to build consistency into the design. We know what longevity and lifespan and the things we care about, energy efficiency as the end customer. So we bring in all those things through, and we're keeping consistent in each development. We're taking the learnings from the previous ones, putting them into the next one. There's a really quick open feedback cycle between the customer, the developer, and the construction company, because we're all in the same group. So we build in those learnings, early contractor involvement, the construction team feeding into the design really efficiently. So all those learnings are starting to come through, and it's bit by bit, saving $1,000 here and $1,000 there and $1,000 there over, 100 homes, that adds up. Over 300 homes, that adds up, so on. So we're starting to see those efficiencies. And design standardization does not mean uniformity.
That was gonna be my counter to that, was in danger of creating cookie cutter blocks of housing. How do you guys ensure that there is that consistency and those efficiencies, and at the same time end up with something that's not same?
Agreed. Well, I mean, one of our key approach to communities is blind mixed tenure. And basically what that is healthy communities that create a sense of belonging and cohesion are actually diverse mixed communities. And diverse in terms of diversity of cultures, diversity of age brackets, diversity of income brackets. And it sounds counterintuitive, you're putting poor people against rich people, that doesn't work. Well, actually, all the evidence shows that it does if you do it well, not in big clumps of, it's not surprising that when you put a lot of high needs people all together next to each other, you're going to create problems. But if you spread that out across a community well, they actually do a lot better. And so again, that's our approach to the overall community planning, these mixed tenures. And so what that allows us to do is do a range of different typologies: 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds, walk-ups, apartments, terrace, standalone townhouse. But within each of those, what we aim for internally is standardized, efficient design. But externally, we are much more freer to keep the design reflective of the local community. So, for example, our local, one of our recent projects, New Brighton, it's on the beach. And so what we tried to do is make the exterior of all the buildings individual and reflective of that environment, a beachside community. But if you go inside, they are largely the same type of design, same materials, same specifications, whether it's the affordable housing, whether it's the progressive ownership, or whether it's the market housing. All good quality specs, but that's where you get the real efficiency. And so you can move things around, you can change the exterior. That's not super expensive, but you can get those efficiencies with the interiors, keeping them standardized, keeping them efficient, and building across all those different tenure types.
And is this is Sandylands a private development or a public housing project, or a mix of both, or?
So the one I was talking about was Teapot, and then Sandylands is another one, and I'll come to that one. So these are mixed. So the Home Foundation has funded the projects. Kāinga Maha is the developer, and Home Construction is the builder. And so they are a mix of tenures. So they have some affordable rentals. So these are rentals at 80% of the market. They have some normal market rentals. They have some progressive home ownership through that we got support through Ministry of Pacific Peoples to provide assisted ownership schemes for Pacific people. And they have some that are sold to the market. to investors, to first-home buyers, to owner-occupiers.
Quite an interesting mix, blend of...
Yes, blend. And Sandylands will be the same. It'll be a mix of some form of that mixture. Another development we completed a couple of years ago, Karamu, had a mixture of some community housing, had some mix of some market rentals, market housing, and first homeowner housing as well across that mix. Now, if you drive around that community, it's finished, the 84 homes there, you would not be able to pick out which ones are the community housing, which one's the rental housing, which one's the owner-occupy.
Okay.
They're all different, but you can't pick out the different tenure types.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that as well, because obviously there's been a lot of publicity around government spending being reined in and there's always focus on unemployment and housing and things like that. And a lot of criticism, I think. I'm not familiar with the sector, so I don't know how much of it's due and how much of it's not, but what, broadly speaking, I think it'd be fair to say there's been criticism in terms of the pace at which some of those things have been rolled out at. There's been criticism of the cost of some of those projects and probably everything else in between. But what are some of what do people not see, I guess, is maybe a different way to approach that. What does the general public not see? They might see the newspaper headline saying this, but what do they not see behind the scenes? Yeah,
I mean, housing in New Zealand, for a range of reasons, is very, very challenging, complex, right? Not in the very least that a large proportion of our total country's capital, at a public level and largely at a private level, is held in housing. These are our assets.
Yeah.
This is what our wealth is held in. And at a very, very high proportion relative to many other countries where their wealth might be, in stocks and bonds and companies and these sorts of things. So immediately it's going to have a lot of attention and everyone's going to have an opinion because their retirement is attached to it in a very large way.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to recognize that fact. The other fact is, for those reasons I mentioned before, where a small population across a very, very large land mass, building housing is complex, challenging, expensive. Yes, we can do more to help that. But fundamentally, as a country, we have not been building enough housing, enough of the right type of housing. Now, I'm sure if you took all the Airbnbs and all the vacant batches and you filled them all permanent housing, possibly we would have enough. I haven't done that analysis. I don't know. There's a guy here in Christchurch, Mike Blackburn, who could tell you like that. He's done the analysis. But nevertheless, we have been not building enough of the right type of housing in the right place. And so that undersupply has obviously resulted in additional pressure on the cost of housing. So this is a very challenging area, right, for the government to deal with. It's politically charged. Everyone's got an opinion. And from the very left to the very right, there's a whole range of solutions put forward to sort of as somewhat silver bullets. Now, to be fair to the current Minister of Housing, he recognises this is a very complex thing. And you've got to work at a whole range of areas, from improving supply and all the challenges that are, constraining supply, council, consenting, land, RMA, as well as the actual construction through efficiency and, the building code and consenting processes and all this. Then you've got the challenge of infrastructure. To build a house, you need roads and water and waste and electricity and a whole lot of other things, transportation attached to it. These are very expensive things to build, and someone has to pay for them. So I think we've got a whole lot of challenges in New Zealand, and I'm not just sort of trying to not give you a straight answer. I'm trying to paint the picture that this is really hard, and you've got to address all of these things also at the same time. And I think one of the big challenges for the government too is they spend a lot of money on housing, not in the what they used to with Kainga and building a lot of housing. That was a lot, and they spent a lot. But actually, the government in New Zealand spends nearly $5 billion every single year in the form of rent subsidies, whether it's the income rent related subsidy for those in social housing or it's the accommodation supplement. that a large portion of renters and some homeowners get to help subsidise the cost of housing in New Zealand. That's a lot of money. That $5 billion that's spent every year on those subsidies could be spent on new housing to increase the supply. And as our rents go up and our housing costs go up, the cost burden to the government is also going to go up from those increasing subsidies.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big area that we probably need to address as a country. Those subsidies are important. They help support a lot of families. They help subsidise their income, and they help support some of their housing costs. But I think the way it's spent is not necessarily as efficient or as effective, I think, as it could. And also, the gap between the IRRS and the AS subsidy is huge. And what it does is it traps families in particular subsidy types, often at the most expensive ones, because they're not incentivised to move to increasing housing agency independence. Because if they can get IRRS and social housing, their rent is capped at 25% of the household income, regardless of what their income is. That is awesome.
Yeah.
The gap between that and then the best you can probably hope for from the accommodation supplement means your rent is probably going to go from 25%, possibly up to 30, 40 or 50%, even with the accommodation supplement.
Wow.
And that's a huge gap to try and cover. So families aren't incentivized to get out of, social housing or into, more progressive forms of housing or ultimately into ownership because they just get trapped. So I think there's some things we can do more efficiently to help make some of that large expenditure, be more efficiently spent.
I've seen you talk about efficiency and around build timelines and some of the work that you're doing to try and reduce those build timelines. Can you talk about that in a little more detail in terms of what you guys have done and what you're seeing now as a result of those efforts?
Yeah. So this was actually a really important piece of work that Kaingaroa kicked off through their HDS Housing Delivery System program. And so our team, and being a part of that program, learned a lot. It was a very good program. And as I understand it, that Kaingaroa is carrying on with that HDS program, which is great to see. And I think effectively what that program is aiming to do is aiming to break down every single stage, every single component of the housing delivery system, right from early design phase, getting builders, getting your plumbers, getting your electricians involved in that design phase to remove and design out inefficiency and waste. So that's the first step. The next step is then ensuring that once you are on site, your phasing and your delivery of housing is really efficient, and it's programmed by the hour for efficiency.
Wow.
And where you have variance from the most efficient route, you're tracking that. Because again, as we said before, feedback loops are the only way you can improve. You've got to build feedback loops in. So you've got to understand, okay, we had a weather event here. Well, can we control that? No, you can't always control the weather, but perhaps you could control the timing to avoid your outside work not taking place in winter. Or you can maybe do some sort of staging internal work now where the weather, and have internal work available in case the weather does go bad. So there's all these sorts of things that feedback loops can help inform the next time around, so that each time you get more efficient, you get more efficient, you get more efficient. So I think that's one of the key areas that we have focused on. Now as a sort of a developer ourselves, where time is a genuine cost. Now, it's also a cost for builders. So this idea that builders just naturally want to take a long time or really slow is folly, because builders have overheads. For them, time is money. So of course they're incentivized, and all the sub-trades underneath are incentivized to go efficiently. So I think everyone's in alignment of that, but ensuring that everyone's working across the value chain in alignment with the same information, real-time information, efficiency of communication is really credible. I likened it to a little bit to building an aircraft. Now, if you think of Boeing or Airbus, these are highly complex pieces of equipment with thousands, possibly millions of component parts. And they come from all over the world. They are, sourced from thousands of suppliers. The construction industry works the same way, just without any of the efficiency. And so I think, the way Boeing and Airbus ensure a lot of their efficiency is ensure they have these highly integrated, aligned value and supply chains that are working on single sources of the truth, single pieces of design, real-time information systems with highly efficient design processes up front. And so I think the construction industry, if it can start to adopt and learn from some of those things, it will get more efficient. But yes, we are seeing a lot of efficiency. Now our own teams are working on, modularization and prefabrication as well. Staging is a big part of ensuring that you are getting a lot of design efficiency and build efficiency happening as well. So, yeah.
You mentioned getting things down to the hour. How the hell do you get a tradie to turn up down to the nearest hour? I'd love to know.
It's very challenging, and it's not always perfect. But again, partnerships is the key here, right? Which is why we have preferred to call our sub-trades, subcontractors, build partners, because it is really a partnership. You are relying on them to do their bit well. They're relying on you to do your bit well. The electrician is relying on the plumber to do his bit well. The jib, stopper is relying on the builder to ensure they do their well, and the electrician is equally. So everyone's relying on each other to do their bit really well. So I think approaching everything firstly from a partnership, recognizing this is a genuine partnership, is really critical. And then it comes down to really, really good on-site, real-time project management. Project managers who are well-planned, who run efficient, well-designed project plans, are running a critical path, understand implications and impacts on that critical path, because problems are going to happen. Hawking traffic's going to cause your electrician to get stuck, even though he was on track to be there on time, and he's going to be an hour late. You need to know the effect of that hour on your critical path and be able to reprogram quickly and sequentially such that you can make up that lost time somewhere else. That takes just good project management with the right project management tools.
Going back to how long your projects are taking now and what kind of impact this work has had on timelines, have you got any measures on that? I'm assuming you do.
Yeah, we do. So we were building. Let's take a sort of a standardized infill lot of let's take 10 townhouses on a brownfields infill development. So they would historically take us around about 140 working days. We consistently got them to below 100 working days.
Wow.
And I think our fastest time is 76 working days.
Wow.
So it's
some
efficient.
Monumental.
It is.
Yeah.
It is basically nearly half.
Mm.
The caveat with all of this, I want to point out though, is safety. There are and can be trade-offs between speed and particularly safety. Now, I think you can do speed and quality at the same time. But keeping that process as safe is very hard to do. Not impossible, but very hard to do.
Okay. For example?
Well, one of the ways that you increase the speed, for example, if you've got a multi number of houses on a site, so 10 townhouses, is that you have multiple teams. So rather than sequentially, you do things concurrently. Mm-hmm. So instead of one building team, you have 4. So what that does is you immediately then have more people on a single site. Mm-hmm. More people means more risk, and they are working over top of each other. And if you don't have really good, well-cleared, well-defined health and safety processes, risk management, on top of it in terms of looking out for hazards and managing those consistently all the time, you are creating an environment where the risk goes up and there's more likelihood of accidents happening. And then also just simply when people are working to deadlines and targets and working at pace, pressure comes on. Yep. Pressure forces people sometimes to either take shortcuts or not to be pay attention or not to do things safely.
Mm.
So one of our real big challenges in this push for speed is how do we ensure we maintain safety and the same level of safety as we would back when we're doing them at 130 working days.
Mm.
And look, I'm pleased to say that we have kept that same level of safety. And I think it's meant that there's probably ultimately a flaw on how efficiently we can get, at least using the current building methodologies. Now, more prefabrication, more panelization, you could probably start to change that and get that. But I think from ensuring quality, ensuring speed, and ensuring the same high level of safety on site, I think there is a flaw to how fast you can get.
Mm. I'm curious about the other systems that you found effective in your business. It sounds like you've got a number of them, and perhaps with the background in technology that has shaped some of that thinking. But what are some of the systems that, whether it's software or whether it's communication or whether it's process, what are some of the systems that have worked for you as a business and really helped you lift your game?
Well, I'll start with probably a really, really robust real-time financial reporting system. So we use an integrated project costing system called CAT that's integrated with our back-end, general ledger financial system. And that provides us with real-time information on all of our projects in terms of where they are sitting financially real time. It gives our project managers on site access, our quantity surveyors access, and then that's integrated in with an overall project management system called Procore. And so Procore integrates health and safety with project management, quality management, and financing, variation management, all of those sorts of things. And so what it allows centralization, again, this sort of single source of the truth. And it allows your entire supply chain to have visibility and to be interactive with that as well. And you can turn off what you do and don't show and all of that. But that has been really critical because oftentimes when we came in the industry, it felt like you were financially always looking backwards. You'd get to the end of a project and you're like, oh, we didn't make money on that. Yeah. Despite, how well you may have budgeted or not at the start. So I think ensuring that you've got that real-time financial visibility is really critical because what it does, it allows you to, again, making those value judgments in real time too. So a project manager goes, I'm currently behind program. In order to speed up program or get back on critical paths, I need to bring in an extra team. I need to spend some more to get some cover over the building so I can work in the poor weather. So all these and so to inform those real-time decisions, you need the financial information to make sure that if I do that, is it going to actually cost me more than the potential time I save?
Yeah.
Or I want to pick up. So you've got to have those real-time information there so you can make those really important decisions on.
Yeah, that's a really good example in terms of if you didn't have that system, then like you said, you're just waiting till the end of the project to see if you made the right decision. But if you've got it real time and you can make a decision about, do I go this way or this way, and what's the cost of doing A and B?
Correct. And it just empowers your teams on site to make good decisions. Rather than go, I hope this actually saves me more than it's going to cost me. So rather than that guesswork, it takes that out of it.
Yeah. And in terms of your impact on the business, I want to dig into that a little bit because I think there's always that thing of founder's DNA where no matter how big the business gets or how small it is or in between, the founder always has a big impact on it. So I want to understand a little more about that. What are some of the skills that you think you've brought to the business just off the bat, maybe in naturally, and in terms of your background, and then what are some of the things that you've brought later on through development and growth?
Yeah.
Hard one to answer, I know, especially for a Kiwi, isn't it?
It's a hard one. Look, I think, early on, my accounting finance background, I think was very helpful, right? Construction development has big numbers and they move quickly, and being on top of those is really important. So I think that was really helpful in the early days. Certainly, our CFO and our accounts team have grown well beyond my ability. But I think early on, paying attention to those really important financial hygiene factors and my background understanding of that and bringing some rigor to that process, I think was quite helpful. I think the other thing was, Strengths Finders, my number 1 and 2 is futuristic and strategic. So, as my wife says to me constantly, I'm always living in the future, which is great, but also terribly frustrating because you never get to the future. And then also strategic is quite helpful because helpfully I can think about the future, I can envision what that might look like, and I can perhaps see some strategic processes or steps to get there. And then my third one is activation. So I'm like,
pretty good combo.
Let's just do this. Let's keep going. Like, stop talking about it. Now let's do. And then finally, my fourth one is communication. So I'm quite good then at telling others, hey, this is this cool future that I can see. And by the way, here's how we're going to get here. And let's go. Come on, let's encourage the team. So I think those things have all been really, really helpful. Certainly in the early days. I think as we have grown, as the organizations have sort of split into different entities, I've recognized that as you kind of get beyond those early growth stage, you've got to bring in a different type of leadership as well, or leadership with a range of additional strengths to what I had. And so I'd say probably one of the things when I look back a little bit that has been really helpful is quite early on, I was able to see that these organizations would grow beyond just me, and I needed really, really good leaders around me who could both support me and in time, hopefully, grow beyond me and take over the organization when it got to a different stage. And so very, very thankfully, we've had amazing individual who's worked for us for over 10 years, Paul Nunai, who started in people and culture, moved into operations, then was a GM. And then as I stepped out of the construction business, we appointed him as chief executive. And, he's taken the organization in an area and grown it in areas that it needed to grow in that I didn't have the capability of doing. And I stepped back, and so now I'm sort of, champion and encourager of that process. And what it's allowed me to do is put my energy and efforts into other parts. So Kāinga Maha getting going, and then Home Capital Partners getting going, and now Te Wawa Te Kāinga, which is, tenancy management, property management. So again, it allows me to kind of use the bits I'm really good at, going, hey, here's this cool future. Here's how we get there. Let's do it. Come on, guys. So that's been helpful, I think. And again, I've had some great people around, great mentors around me who have seen that in me, have been able to pull it out, and have also just sort of reminded me of probably when my strengths weren't the most important for the organization now. And it was time to think about someone else.
I was wondering that about how have you kind of gotten out of your own way? Because sometimes I think we know inherently we're not operating in our strengths, but we just keep plotting the course. And you mentioned mentors and even a tool like Strengths Finder is helpful in doing that. But what are some of the ways that you've kind of gotten out of your own way?
I think the first and most important one was early on. My wife and I set up an advisory board, and this was really just people who we trusted, who were a little further along in the journey, who could help us with our blind spots, and who could openly, honestly speak into primarily my wife and I as individuals in terms of our roles in the organization, but also helping us more sort of with the strategy, the vision, the mission, as we were working and refining it through as sounding boards. So that was a really incredibly important step we took. And they have been some of the most profound sources of wisdom, guidance, challenge, accountability, and has really resulted in, I think, a lot of what our organization is accomplishing today. It helped me see where I was good at, where I was not good at, where I needed to put in additional leadership or strength. So I would say that has probably been the most important. And then my wife is just an incredibly honest, business partner. She knows the good parts of me and the not so good parts of me, and she speaks into that and she challenges that, and we balance each other well. She does things that I'm not very good at. She does things, I do things that she's not good at. So it's a great partnership.
Combo.
Yeah.
Nice. What are some of the things that you've changed your mental model on along the journey? Things that maybe you believed in the start of the journey and have shifted as you've gone on?
About myself?
Yeah, or business in general?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think early on, I placed a lot, early part of my career, I spent in sort of startups and was in tech startups for a while. And in that space, it's about the sort of the courageous, visionary entrepreneur leader, and the organization rose or falls on them. So early on, I think I believed it was me and up to me, and I needed to succeed. If I didn't, the organization would kind of crash and burn, and I had to carry everything. I think in my mentoring journey, what I've realized is, as we've just spoken about, is yes, I've got some strengths, but I'm only going to get so far, and I'm gonna run out of steam. And getting others who have different strengths along the journey earlier is really, really important. And actually, it's the collective strengths together that actually ensure the organization succeeds. And so I think that for me, with my mentors, that's been the biggest realization and biggest shift in my thinking. The person out the front who's often the most seen is not always the most important. What they do is important. That job, someone needs to do it, absolutely. And an organization that doesn't have that just can be problematic. But they are dependent on all other parts of the organization and individuals within the organization doing their bit really, really well. One of the most profound people, I think, in our organization has been in our accounts team. She has been a consistent source of diligence. And, I talked about integrity. She's the one that ensures our financial systems are detailed and accurate. And she has been essential to the success. All that real-time information, all these things could not happen if she just was not excellent at that part of her role.
Yeah.
So I recognize, and I could go through 20, 40 people like that, right? You take them out and that thing starts to not work very well. And then certainly my role does not work at all if you take them out. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm going to finish with a really hard question, which I thought about this week and as a good measure of what the future looks like for you, but also the journey to that. If we were sitting here in 12 months' time, and it had just been an amazing 12 months, the best 12 months you could imagine, what would you have done and who would you have been along the way?
I would probably say, coming off our last conversation, it would be I have been a person that has got out of the way of others and help champion them to succeed and do their bit really well. We have a set of incredible chief executives who lead our different organizations. And I think that in 12 months' time, having just championed them encouraged them, seen them succeed. If they do that, the organization, the mission would just be humming. So, and I think sometimes I get in the way, largely because of it's also those strengths, they become my weaknesses too, right? I see that and I'm like, no, but it should be that. And I can see how you get there and I can do it. And I can tell you about how you're not doing it right. But, but actually getting out of the way of them and just encouraging and championing them, providing support where they need it and when they need it. I think if I can do that in the next 12 months, I think our organization's just flourish.
Awesome. Love that. Well, that's a good place to finish.
Thank you.
Thanks, Israel.
Thanks, Matt.